It's the 2nd of February again, and once again all the world's eyes turn towards Gobbler's knob and the twitching nose of one hairy weatherman. If you don't know what the hell that all means, it's the perfect time to turn your attention back to one of cinema's most beloved and critically acclaimed comedies from the great minds of Harold Ramis and Bill Murray. Witty, barbed, and with a dark heart that was never quite as nasty nor as draining as it could have been, Groundhog Day has transcended the usual limits of the medium to become a genuine cultural phenomenon as well as a bona fide dictionary term. And that's no small achievement in itself. Especially in filmmaking terms, it's the least accolade of a justifiably adored film. Now, it might have cost the world Harold Ramis and Bill Murray as a team, but it did transform the latter from clown into pathos-laden leading man in very real terms. For that alone, you should be eternally grateful. Precisely 25 years after the cult classic hit cinemas, now is as good a time as ever to look back at some of the least known and most eye-opening facts about Groundhog Day. I'm Scott from Whatculture.com, and these are 10 mind-blowing facts you didn't know about Groundhog Day. Number 10, there's a remake and a musical. Thankfully, Hollywood has so far resisted the urge to make a remake of the film, aside from Edge of Tomorrow, kinda. But in 2004, Italian film director Giulio Manfredonia did shoot a remake called Stork Day, or It's Already Yesterday, which makes no sense considering the implications of the film. His version is about an egocentric TV documentarian who is trapped in a loop while filming in Tenerife. For a while, Stephen Sondheim was linked with a musical remake, but he distanced himself in 2003, saying that to make a musical of Groundhog Day would be to gild the lily. It cannot be improved. Number 9, Tom Hanks was almost Phil Connors. Writer Danny Rubin admitted that he never considered Bill Murray for Phil Connors when writing the script. He actually thought it was more suited to a more serious actor who could do comedy. He said, "I suggested Tom Hanks and they actually asked him, but he declined." He later told Harold Ramis that he was right to turn it down because he wouldn't have worked in that part. He said everybody knows that he's a nice guy, so if he started out nasty, everybody would anticipate his transformation. With Bill, you have no idea what he's going to do. So, counter to popular belief, it was Hanks who actually turned the role down, something he has in common with Michael Keaton, who also passed it up. Meanwhile, Harold Ramis also considered Chevy Chase, Steve Martin, and John Travolta for the role of Connors, but he considered them as all far too nice when compared to Bill Murray. Clearly, he hadn't spent enough time with Chase. Number 8, the Jewish and Buddhist subtext. There's a massive response dedicated to reading religious subtexts into the film, with a particular focus on Jewish and Buddhist readings. Harold Ramis' own mother-in-law, a Zen Buddhist, said she had been moved by the film, and Spiritual Cinema Circle co-founder Stephen Simon called it a wonderfully human comedy about being given the rare opportunity to live several lifetimes all in the same day. Of course, that's not how the film was marketed, but that concept is at the heart of the story. It clearly illustrates the Buddhist idea of samsara, or continuing rebirth, and Bill Murray is the Bodhisattva, a figure reincarnated to the brink of nirvana who returns to save everyone. Now, of course, that's a little bit epic compared to what we actually got, but still. In Washington, a branch of the Chinese spiritual movement Falun Dafa has used the movie to instruct members in its belief that the spiritual self is not allowed to advance to higher levels until it learns from past mistakes. Dr. Niles Goldstein, a New York rabbi, sees the same ideas as indicative of the pillars of Judaism. He quoted, "The movie tells us, as Judaism does, that the work doesn't end until the world has been perfected." Groundhog Day, now showing at your local temple. Number 7, why Sonny and Cher? The choice to use Sonny and Cher's I Got You Babe Every Morning Phil Awakens was an early one. Apparently it was in Danny Rubin's wildly different first draft and was one of the few specific details that actually made it through to the final version. But why was it so perfect? Rubin answered that particular question during a Reddit AMA. Here's why I thought of it. If you listen to the recording at the very end, it sort of winds down with a big slow, "I got you, babe." You think it's all over and then it creeps back in. "I got you, babe, I got you, babe." I thought this repetition was perfect. The timing never worked out for them to use it in the movie that way, but I guess because it's a love song and because even though it's catchy it would drive you crazy after a while, it was always a good idea. Number 6, Bill Murray once bought hundreds in attendance a Danish. Another one for the long list of barely believable Bill Murray stories, especially given his cantankerous demeanor. According to Stephen Tobolowsky, during one particular shoot, Murray put a stop to things to feed the gathered masses. Tobolowsky says, "We were about to start shooting Groundhog Day, and on the first day there were 500 townsfolk gathered there to watch us. Bill looked at me and said, 'Do you know what these people need? Danishes.' Bill took me to the local bakery and bought every single baked good in sight." The actor didn't fare so well himself in the cake stakes. When filming the gorging scene, he was offered a spit bucket, but he refused, actually ending up making himself ill. Number 5, it's the basis of a self-help book. Motivational speaker Paul Hannum based his mantra for self-fulfillment on Groundhog Day, even going so far as to write a book called The Magic of Groundhog Day. He charges his readers with unlocking the magic of the movie to help transform their own lives and break free from repetitive thoughts and behaviors that keep you stuck in a rut. He recognized in the film the keys to transforming a mundane day into a magical day by simply changing your attitudes. It's just that simple, apparently. The film also inspired another less philosophical trend. Weirdly, when it airs on TV, it's actually traditional to air the same 6 commercials on a loop during breaks. See if you can spot them next time it's on. Number 4, live, die, repeat. Danny Rubin admits that in his first drafts, or at least in the planning stage, which ran a lot longer than the writing itself, he only had a high concept, which said that the main character was the only variable in the universe. A time loop was included in which the character was forced to relive the same day over and over, and from there he built the script around the core idea that one lifetime just isn't enough, hence the Buddhist appeal. There are some people, those Arrested Development type men, who can't really outgrow their adolescence, and I thought, well, maybe one lifetime isn't enough, maybe you need more. He also started his story in the middle, with Phil already in the loop and explaining in voiceover how he got there. Harold Ramis thought it was better to show the first day. Number 3, someone actually thinks the groundhog, like the animal, is Christ reborn. Back to religion, and there's a theory that states that Punxsutawney Phil is pretty much Jesus. So said New York Times film critic Michael Bronski. The groundhog is clearly the resurrected Christ, the ever-hopeful renewal of life at springtime and a time of pagan Christian holidays. And when I say that the groundhog is Jesus, I say that with great respect. Despite this supposedly Christian message, it's telling that Phil never actually remembers an afterlife, or anything of death really, other than the process of dying itself. So despite the attraction of a groundhog messiah, the film is far more relevant to religions that deal in reincarnation more concretely. Number 2, Bill Murray was remarkably difficult to work with. The story of Harold Ramis and Bill Murray falling out is a well-publicized one, but until relatively recently, nobody knew the extent that Murray actually played in the fallout, or why it happened in the first place. It's actually become pretty fashionable to just assume that it was because the director and actor couldn't agree on the tone of the film. Although that might have played a part, it was actually Murray's personal life that became the issue. His first marriage was dissolving and he was, somewhat forgivably, cranky. It all came to a head when communication lines broke down, and Ramis in the studio asked Murray to improve himself. It was agreed that things might work a lot smoother if Bill was to hire a PA to help with the day-to-day nonsense he couldn't deal with. So he duly hired one, potentially the first one he came across, as they were profoundly deaf, did not have oral speech, and spoke only in American Sign Language, which neither Bill nor anyone in production could understand. As Ramis remembers, Bill said, "Don't worry, I'm going to learn sign language." I think it was so inconvenient that in a couple of weeks he gave that up. Number 1, how long Phil was trapped. In the original screenplay, Phil was supposed to be stuck in his loop for 10,000 years, marking each day by reading one page of a book in the library, eventually reading everything and mastering all the skills he shows on screen. But that was a bit vague, and one terribly smart website once worked out exactly how long Phil is actually trapped for. That's 12,395 days, or 33 years and 350 days. Stephen Tobolowsky, the film's Ned Ryerson, actually responded directly to this important science in a radio interview, not only confirming that he agreed, but also with the fact that the first script had been very clear about its 10,000-year timeline. After hearing an assessment that put the time loop period at 10 years, Harold Ramis gave his own reading, ignoring the original script and basically endorsing our brilliant work. He says, "I think the 10-year estimate is too short. It takes at least 10 years to get good at anything. And allotting for the downtime and misguided years he spent, it had to be more like 30 or 40 years. Go Whatculture!"